basically, I mean, the main headline is that we found just a portion of our members have spent nearly $500 million
Wow.
defending themselves against the SEC.
This content is brought to you by BitGo, which is one of the top crypto custodians in the crypto industry. BitGo works with many big companies and brands, such as Pantera Capital, Bitstamp, and Bitcoin IRA. Nike also selected BitGo to power its wallets for its NFTs. And BitGo has many great services, such as hot wallets, custodial wallets, self-managed cold wallets, and NFT wallets. Many institutions trust BitGo with its top-level security and incredible services, such as being able to deploy your capital while it's in custody, which includes lending, borrowing, trading, staking, DeFi access, and more. If you'd like to learn more about BitGo, please visit bitgo.com, link in the description. Welcome into the Thinking Crypto podcast. I'm your host, Tony Edward, and my guest today is Laura Sanders, who is Policy Counsel at the Blockchain Association. Laura, welcome in. Great to have you back.
Wonderful to be here. Thank you so much.
Laura, big news coming out from the Blockchain Association. You guys teamed up with HarrisX to launch regulationbyenforcement.com. Tell us about this.
Yeah, absolutely. We're really excited about it. Basically, what the website does, and the website is regulationbyenforcement.com. What it does is track the expenses that the blockchain industry has had to use to protect itself against SEC overreach and regulation by enforcement. So, basically, I mean, the main headline is that we found just a portion of our members have spent nearly $500 million
Wow.
defending themselves against the SEC. Just to put that in context, I mean, we have about 100 members. Only about 20% of the members actually responded to the survey. And, not every company in this space is a member of Blockchain Association. So
Mhm.
we are looking at a very, conservative number, and it's still kind of eye-popping. And what we really want to do by, putting this number out there is obviously the number, it's shocking, it's a huge number, but it's also just think about every single dollar of that amount is one that could have been redirected towards, a job in the
Yeah.
industry, investments in, innovation and new technologies, or even like a headquarters or something where, you would have brought secondary market effects to a community. I mean, it's just such a shame that we're having to give all this money away to big law firms, basically, to
Yeah.
try to defend the industry against, these lawsuits. And the other thing I'll say is just, it would be one thing if this was if the SEC was blowing all these resources and going after bad actors and was, this really successful litigation project, but it's simply not. They've been called out repeatedly for bringing frivolous lawsuits and for employing a strategy that doesn't let the industry know before they are sued whether they are compliant or non-compliant. And two, that essentially wastes taxpayer dollars trying to figure out in real time whether the subject of a lawsuit has done whatever the SEC believes is the appropriate thing on that given day, because their strategy has changed. Even in the time that, that I've been a BA, the strategy has changed, or their expectations for the industry has changed. And
Mhm.
so, it's the other thing that the website does is emphasize that the SEC is there to protect consumers and to facilitate, capital formation. And this strategy is just not achieving those goals. I mean, we had HarrisX do a poll of voters. These are the consumers that the SEC is supposed to protect. And this is simply not the way that consumers want to be protected. They do not agree, with this strategy whatsoever. I think it was two-thirds of voters think that the SEC, needs to wait for Congress to pass a law
Mm.
before taking action against our industry. And, I think 2 to 1, they believed that this regulation by enforcement strategy was harmful and that, they really preferred just clear regulatory guidelines, which isn't really shocking, right? I think if you asked, even your parents or people outside of the industry, they would agree. This is just not the way to regulate an industry. And so that's really, what we wanted to do with the website was just highlight the losses that, not only our industry, but really everyone in the United States is suffering because of this strategy. So hopefully people will check it out.
Yeah, I love that you guys did this because I believe education and awareness is important. People need to know what's happening here, especially it's their tax dollars that are being wasted, right?
Yes.
So they should keep their government accountable, even if outside of the SEC. But obviously we're talking about this topic specifically. And the fact that companies have to spend this amount of money on legal fees and some of these lawsuits have been unlawful. And the courts have
Exactly.
said so. Not, one could say, "Hey, I'm biased. I own crypto," but the courts have said some of these things are unlawful. It's unbelievable what's happening. So I appreciate you guys doing this and getting
Yeah.
the information out there. And look, I mean, people are very frustrated with the SEC. You mentioned like my parents, right? Like my mom owns some crypto, and
Yeah.
and she often asks me, "Hey, I saw this headline. What does this mean? Why is the SEC going after crypto?" And I'm like, "Well, mom, it's complicated. Like
Yeah.
it's kind of ridiculous."
I know. And, those are the consumers that the SEC is supposed to be protecting. So this idea that, it does sort of feel, and like the phrasing that you used is appropriate because it kind of feels like instead of protecting those consumers, they're punishing them for being associated with crypto. And, I think that that kind of underscores that this strategy isn't really about consumers. It's more about like some ideological, crusade that we don't
Mhm.
fully understand. And to your point, I mean, well, let me just say on the taxpayer front, I mean, just extrapolate out. So all overall enforcement actions are dropping, but enforcement actions against crypto companies are soaring as that happens. So, you really have to say, is this an effective use of my tax dollars to go after what is comparatively a small portion of the financial economy in the United States? I mean, it doesn't make a ton of sense. And you might say to that, well, maybe, these companies are breaking the rules disproportionately. But that's just, hasn't been borne out in the lawsuits whatsoever. I mean, the SEC can say, well, why don't you guys just follow the rules? We don't know what the rules are. We would love to follow them. I mean, I cannot tell you how many member companies I have met with. I'm a lawyer, so I tend to talk to their GCs and their legal departments, and they're saying, you know, I genuinely don't know whether we're in compliance right now. I'm trying my best. I'm trying to reach out to the regulators. But they're like, we can't get answers. It's crazy. And that's just not good for anyone.
Mhm.
And on, to like with respect to the lawsuits themselves, I mean, just think through like the last, I don't know, year and a half. I mean, we had the court in grayscale saying that SEC acted arbitrarily and capriciously. We had Debtbox where the lawsuit was dismissed, the lawyers were sanctioned, they were found to have grossly abused their power. In Binance, I think the case where the judge said that, this case by case, coin by coin strategy is just not going to work for the SEC.
Mhm.
And, even in the Third Circuit, Coinbase was arguing in front of the panel there. And a judge said, it really seems like you're just more interested in picking off, case by case, harm by harm, rather than actually giving clear guidance. And that is arbitrary and capricious.
Mhm.
We need to know whether we are following the rules before we are sued. Like
Yeah.
we need something to base our actions off of. And so that's really, I hope that the amount of money spent here really just drives home to voters. We're just days away from the election, and to whoever the new administration is, that we need a new leadership at the SEC, and two, whatever that looks like, the priority must be to get legislation in place, and then B, like from that legislation, promulgate really clear and, concise guidelines that our industry can follow. And we don't have to constantly be in doubt and concerned that we're going to be pursued by regulators.
Yeah, absolutely. And and this the stats you have on your website about the voters and the polling and so forth, we've seen there's a lot of single issue crypto voters, and many of them
Yes.
are really upset, and they're
Yeah.
going to make their voices heard at the ballot.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I mean, I personally was surprised at how many people are voting on this specific issue alone. And I think, if I'm taken aback by just how many people are voting on it, I think probably our, lawmakers will be as well, because they're, way further out from these issues than you or I.
Hmm.
Um, and so I hope that they take a look at it, because it really is interesting. I think they make up close to 20%. Crypto, voters make up close to 20% of the electorate. So,
Hmm.
even if they are, not single issue voters, they still really care about these issues and they want to be heard. And like your mom or like you or like any crypto holder, like, they don't want to feel as though the regulator that's meant to protect them, thinks they've made a bad decision or is judging them or, setting them up to fail, which is where we are right now, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. And uh, it's just sad because this technology shouldn't be political at all. Like, it's just a technology. It's supposed to be neutral. It's create jobs, wealth, and so forth. And I can't imagine if we had done this to the internet, where we would have been, right? Would we
Yeah.
have Google in the United States or Amazon in the United States? And it seems I've spoken to various entrepreneurs and founders and so forth, and many who left the United States and many who don't want to come to the United States. They're in other jurisdictions because they're like, hey, we don't want to get a lawsuit. We don't know what's happening here. We're
Yeah.
just going to keep building outside the United States.
Absolutely. And, that's another really significant loss that's hard to quantify. So that's just sort of like the amorphous loss of people who might have otherwise come here to start their companies and instead have decided to stay away or to block US users or whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
And, I think that this is something that I personally believe will resonate even with people who don't own crypto and don't particularly care about crypto, is the fact that, we want the US to remain the global superpower that it is. We want to have, the strongest economy that we can. And, it's no matter what you think of crypto and whether you want to invest in crypto, it's not a great idea to tell people who are developing a new technology, this is not the place for you. Go somewhere else and do it, because I can almost guarantee, putting aside the loss of jobs and, the loss of just like all the economic benefits that come from a person starting a business here, you don't want to potentially lose out on all of the innovations that spring from that person's business and seed that to another country. And that's unfortunately the situation that we're in. And it's not like a down the line long term, yes, it will definitely become a bigger problem over time, but this is happening now. People are choosing not to start businesses here, and that's a really big problem for us. And I think that's something that anyone can understand is not a way forward. And to your point about bipartisanship, like we've been so grateful to, Congress people on both sides who really understand this issue. And, and to be clear, like Democrats, Republicans, they vote. There are people on both sides of the aisle who totally get this and have
Yeah.
been getting out there and explaining it to their colleagues, that it's more than just the bad headlines, that were created by a handful of bad actors. There's an entire industry that exists and operates and is completely like separate and apart from those stories. And so, we're so grateful for them. And we hope that, it continues to kind of become a bipartisan project rather than getting shoehorned into just like being a single party issue when it's just, as you said, it has nothing to do with either party at all. And I saw Laura Shin wrote a great piece, I think it was this
Yeah.
week, in Time magazine that I really recommend people read. Just sort of articulating, the liberal progressive argument for crypto, and it just makes so much sense. I mean, I think everyone can see something here that they connect with. And so, if the website also, leads to people doing more research, that's another, great thing. And we hope that happens.
Yeah, great point. And to your point, outside of the general election, the presidential election, in Congress, we're seeing more bipartisan support, right? The Fit 21 bill making out of the House, that could not have been done without the 71 Democrats. You have really smart people on the Democrat side, like Richie Torres, who are trying to expose Gary Gensler and the hypocrisy and the nonsense that's happening here. And he's been doing a masterful job at these hearings, just giving
Yeah.
like real life examples. And then, what I'm really happy about, I see like Chuck Schumer, top Democrat, obviously, in the
Yeah.
Senate, not aligning with Elizabeth Warren, saying, "Hey, I want to get crypto legislation through, and I'm going to work with my Republican colleagues." And I'm hopeful that maybe end of this year, if not early next year, we get something through Congress or sent to Senate.
I agree. And, just on like the Schumer Warren thing, I mean, I think that everyone has the same goal, I think, which is like we do want to protect investors. We absolutely want to make sure that no one would benefit more from this than the crypto industry. We want to make sure people who are investing in crypto feel really secure doing that
Yeah.
and want to do it a lot and are in every respect like protected by regulators. What we don't want is a regulator whose goal is not that, but is simply to drive the industry overseas. And so I think like, liberals and progressives who really care about consumer protection, yes, that whole like mindset and goal is compatible completely with our industry. And it's all about the approach that you take. And so, if you have somebody like Elizabeth Warren who has essentially, taken the position that this is, just bad and she doesn't want to see it move forward and, she would like to see it shut down. Well, I don't know how much, investor protection is coming out of that, to be honest. Like, then you have somebody who with like Chuck Schumer, who is like, let's get some legislation in the books and let's do something to ensure that, this industry can thrive and that consumers can invest safely in it. I think that is totally compatible with, our goals here at the Blockchain Association. And we're just so thrilled to see people pushing for legislation, pushing for, a different approach to our industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be fair, it does seem like the tide is changing because I mean, if you told me in 2023 that crypto would be, let's say, the largest spender in this election, a bill would make it out of the House with Democrat support, I would not have believed you because things were very different last year. But
Yeah.
to the credit of the industry and to the members of Congress and to you guys who've been doing advocacy and education, things have changed significantly. And then now you have presidential candidates campaigning on crypto. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, like, that is all the work of my like government relations colleagues and Kristen, our CEO, and all of the people who, do work on the political side. But I think we even see it on the legal side, just, how we think about the next year. What is that going to look like from a legal perspective? I think there's a lot more hope that we'll be engaging on productive rulemaking or, looking at drafts of legislation rather than just litigating constantly against a single regulator, or, writing amicus briefs,
Mm.
in support of our members. So I think there's a lot to be hopeful for, going into this next administration. And a lot of that is, to do with the work of, government relations people at Blockchain Association and all of our member companies who have worked so hard to get the ear of people in government.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I love that you guys put this website together. So I'll be tweeting it out and sharing it out to people. I'll put a link in the description. Everybody go check it out and learn about all the things that are happening here. And to your point, Laura, what you mentioned earlier, that over $400 million number, I think that is conservative because
Yes.
not including the taxpayer wasted money, but there's other companies that are fighting too, but it's hard to get all that information in.
Yeah, exactly. Just to emphasize, like, this is a very small number of companies reporting, and it's definitely not A, the entire BA membership, or B, all of the companies who are impacted by this strategy. But just to give an idea, I mean, just a few companies, this is a massive number. It's crazy. And to your point, we did not, go into what like the taxpayer expenditure is here, but I think people can safely extrapolate like the majority of the enforcement actions by the SEC that have increased. This is a crypto focused strategy that is spending, your dollars on something that isn't working. And so I think that people should think about that as they go into next week and, as they consider what they want their lawmakers to push for the next administration.
Yeah, well put. Laura, thank you for taking the time to join me and highlight this. I think it's super important and hope to have you back on soon. Hopefully, as legislation's making its way through the Senate and so forth.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, and everyone go check out the website.